the logic or the reason an impact investor uses is pretty much the same as any other investor uses. Everybody wants to make money, other than the little piece that focuses on the social bit. How do you approach a VC? What we look for when somebody approaches us, and who we think are strong promoters. And in my experience of the last 4.5 years, I thought I should also bring out what the common mistakes are that I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs make. To begin with, we get, any VC gets deals through two channels. One is through an investment banker, another is directly. An investment banker will support you with making your business model. They help you get your financial projections in place. They help you crystallize what your plan is going to be for the next 5 years and so on. Equally importantly, they help you connect to the sort of funders that you will need to talk to. The other way to do it is just approach a VC directly. In that direct approach, there's again two ways. One, if you can get a referral, that's great. It almost always helps. And I say almost always is because if you go through a referral who himself has a bad reputation, then yeah, too bad. But otherwise, you should always try and look for some connection to the VC that you want to approach. In case that is not there, it's fine. You can always cold call. But instead of writing to contacts at X fund or info at X fund, it's always better to write to the senior management of the fund directly. But when you write to them, you should just make sure that you are covering whatever is important to you very briefly in the body of the email. And I've listed out what those are. What is your offering? And how much have you achieved so far? Have you got a customer? Have you rolled it out in whatever your services? Have you rolled it out in one village? What have you done so far? Very briefly, 1 or 2 lines. And then if there's anything in you or your team that is relevant to the business idea that you're talking about, then that should definitely be there. Again, 1 or 2 lines, very briefly. And then you should follow up very persistently. And this doesn't sound good, but there are a lot of deals that come to every VC that's sitting out there. So persistent follow-up, unfortunately, is also required. Now, once a conversation with a VC begins, you would obviously approach them with a business plan. And a lot of VC websites have very well-written sections on what a business plan should cover. Essentially, it should cover whatever a VC looks for when they try to make the investment decision. And what is that? I've broadly classified them into 4 areas. These are not in any order of priority. The first one is obviously the market opportunity, right? So is there an untapped need that you are trying to address? And that it need not be a need that, that nobody is looking to serve. It can be an incremental, it can be an increase of convenience that you're offering. But there has to be a need that you're addressing. And then, how large is that need? How large is the market that is going to pay for you to address the need, right? Let's say you're offering some convenience to the customer, and if you ask 1,000 people, maybe 900 will say, yes, I definitely want to avail of this opportunity. But then of the 1,000, if only 100 are willing to pay for that, then it means you're looking at a very small market, even though there is an untapped need, right? So how large is the market that you can tap? And how fast is this market going to grow? This is pretty much intuitive stuff, right? And in that market, are you the only one, or are you actually fighting against a lot of other people? Because then obviously that reduces the number of customers whose share of wallet you can grab. Now, if the market is very good, then how strong is your business model? And I've written 2 things here. One is technology and one is delivery model. But a lot of people think that to get VC funded, you need to have some really strongly IP protected technology, something very unique and innovative and so on. That's really not the case, at least not in India, at least not in most of the sectors that we're looking at. What you do need to have, however, is something different, not necessarily innovative or IP protected. Do you have a delivery model that is going to address some of the pain points in the sector in a way that nobody has done before, right? Are you going to be able to sidestep some of the challenges that the other people have faced when they tried to provide the same product that you are providing to the market? And as you do that, are there any entry barriers, right? You have this great idea today, but is this going to stop somebody else from doing the same thing just 1 year down the line, right? Very simply put, that is what an entry barrier means. And then the next question is, why will you do this better than anybody else? Now, the simplest answer is, it is my idea, so I will do it. But the meaning of the question is, why can't somebody else come up with the same idea and do it? And the relevant answers to that will be that I have understood the sector a lot more than anybody else has understood because I've spent 5 years working in it. Or maybe I've lived in the US and figured out that there is this great product and nobody else is offering it right now, and I have some exclusive partnership with somebody else there. And then last is, how scalable is the model? We see a lot of examples of great products or great services that can address the problem of, let's say, one village very well. But sometimes it requires so much participation, so much effort from the promoter or from key members of the team that you can't imagine how they're going to replicate this across 500 villages, right? Sometimes the product or service itself is such that it requires a lot of intense effort from key people in the team. So that directly impacts the scalability of the model. Next is the valuation and exit. A lot of people, when they think of valuation, they think, okay, what is the value that I am attaching to my company today? What is the stake that I'm giving to the investor? But that's not the only way the investor looks at it. An investor is coming in is obviously trying to exit in the next 5 years or 8 years. And what is important to them is, how much is the value of my shares, my stock going to be when I exit, right? And that means two things. Let's say you approach an investor today and you are a 1 crore company. You say you want to become a 100 crore company in 5 years. Now that 100 crore is very important because that is almost directly proportional to the value of your company 5 years later. But what is also important is, to become a 100 crore company, how much more money are you going to raise? Maybe you're asking the investor only for 5 crore today and giving him, let's say, a 30% stake, right? But going ahead, before reaching that 100 crore number, if you're going to raise another 25 crores from other people, it means whatever stake I'm getting today is going to come down, correct? As you raise more and more capital, the existing investors get diluted, correct? And that is what I am going to calculate, right? 5 years later, if I want to exit, my 30% stake is not 30% anymore. It might only become 10%, right? So valuation, when an investor is looking at what valuation should I take, he's always looking at what valuation am I going to get 5 years later? How much stake am I going to be left with 5 years later? How large is the company going to be? The third is, who will be the potential buyer? And this is very sector specific usually, but let's say in a sector where there are a lot of large players outside of India, who do not have a presence in India, and you end up establishing something in India that they can easily come and take and run with. Typically, such players are willing to pay a small premium. Typically, and if there are a lot of such players, a lot of such potential buyers, then it means I'm going to find it easier to exit, right? The more players that are there willing to buy my shares, the more competition there will be to buy my shares, which means I get a higher value for my share. That's about it, right? So this is how they look at valuation and exit. And a very, very, very important thing is the promoter and the team in general. And what anybody first looks at is, does the promoter have, what is the connection that the promoter has to the business plan that he's talking about, right? Is there any relevant experience? And that experience could be in that sector, or it could also be that the promoter is a serial entrepreneur. I've run a company before, I've sold it off to somebody else, and just setting up something else now. But that still sort of gives the comfort that, okay, you know what it means to be a promoter. It could also be relevant education. I might have just, maybe in my engineering, I've looked at this and I got interested. And therefore, I've just decided to continue my passion. It could also be just an inspiration. And you'll see a lot of companies outside that have been funded without the promoter having exactly the same experience or education before, but still there would be a strong reason why the promoter wants to work on that specific business plan. That also is enough to convince an investor as to why he believes you will fight for that idea for the next 5 to 10 years. As a promoter is engaging with an investor, there are certain soft aspects as well that are judged. And this is what I've noticed in the last few years of my working in the sector. Good promoters are actually very self-aware, right? Unfortunately, we see a lot of plans where they say, I have a very unique product. There is no competition, right? And I'm going to roll it out across 5 states in the next 5 years. And though one might think that, yeah, that's a plan that sounds really good, it becomes very obvious that the promoter is not able to realize that there's going to be so many challenges down the road. A good promoter is actually very realistic about what are the kind of challenges he or she will face going down the road. Obviously, you don't put it in the first slide of your business plan. But when you're talking to the investor, if you don't show awareness about the, what are the possible pitfalls, then they know that, okay, then there's a lot more education and training that the investor has to do to the promoter, which is not a great thing. Second is, how far is competition from catching up? A lot of business plans have very fancy matrices, right? They typically have a set of attributes here and a set of products in the market that are trying to give those attributes, and almost always their product will have a tick on all attributes, and the others will always have a gap. It's common. It's not wrong to do it, but at a deeper discussion, if one believes that it's always going to remain like this, or that one has to think about if there is an incumbent, how much extra effort is it going to take to them to come and provide those one or two extra attributes that you have today, right? Once you get into the market and prove to people that this is a meaty area to be in, what stops others from coming in? That is what a good entrepreneur has to think about and discuss openly with the investor. Third is, what are the gaps in the current team? Now, if somebody's coming at a very early stage, they might just be a handful of people in the senior management team. This will not really apply to them. But what is really important is a promoter has to know where he needs help and where he does not need help. And a lot of times, there are promoters who come with great products, right? They would have done R&D for 10 years. They would have an amazing product, but a lot of them might not understand the pain of taking it to the market, especially for B2C, when you're selling to individuals, right? We've seen a lot of people thinking that I'll do SMS marketing, or I'll have a website up and then people are going to come and visit my website. But when you actually start executing it, you realize that it's very different. Your product might be great, but the guy out there just doesn't know that it exists. If he knows it exists, he doesn't know that it's great. He doesn't know how it works, and so on. Right? So marketing, a lot of technology entrepreneurs that we see just don't realize how important it is to have somebody who understands marketing, somebody who understands sales. And to be sure, I'm not saying that you need to have all those people when you talk to an investor. I'm saying you need to have the awareness to say that I know these gaps exist. I don't have the money to pay somebody like that today. I will raise funding, and maybe next year I will hire somebody. That clarity of thought is what is really appreciated, and closely linked to that is the promoter himself or herself. What skills do I have, that need to be refined, that need to be improved for me to take this business to where I want it to go? Flowing from there, what are the common mistakes that we have seen some entrepreneurs make? Sacrificing the commercial for social. A lot of people think impact investors just run after social impact, but that's not true at all. It's only logical that if you have an idea that is not commercially great, the funds will stop flowing at some point, which means the business will not scale, which means the social impact will not scale. So there's no social impact without commercial sense. Unfortunately, we get a lot of entrepreneurs who say, I want to do good in my society. I'm deliberately keeping my margins low. That's not business sense. And people realize that you're not going to be able to continue what you're doing for 10 years, right, if you don't have that clarity of thought. Second is underestimating execution pain, and I took that example a while ago when I was talking about technology entrepreneurs, especially in unpiloted areas, right? Obviously, when you go to an investor, you wouldn't have done everything already, and you wouldn't have proven everything that you want to prove. But what is appreciated is understanding the complexity of what it is that you haven't done yet. Third is, this also I've covered, estimating threat from incumbents. This, unfortunately, everybody gets very excited about the idea, and I think it's only natural to think that, yeah, this is a great idea, and I've spent 10 years in it, so nobody else can come up with the same thing. Unfortunately, many times they do, which is fine. As long as you expect them to do, then you're prepared for it. So these are the mistakes we've seen on the business model side. On the fundraising side, a lot of entrepreneurs actually start late. A lot of entrepreneurs don't realize this. They start late. Then what happens? You run out of money. It becomes difficult to manage your customers. half your time or more than that probably has to be dedicated to fundraising, right? Then your team sees you running around here and there, might not get time from you, might lose focus, might get demotivated. It's just downhill from there, right? It's best to start early, even if it is earlier than required, right? You can just start your conversations with investors. Next is you underestimate the capital requirement. One is because one typically does not have a good idea of what execution difficulties are there. The second is also because the time frame for which you need capital, right? If fundraising is an activity that takes up 1 year of your life, you don't want to be doing that every 6 months, right? So if you're going to raise capital, it's best you do it at least for a 2-year period so that you can focus on growing the business once you've raised your money and the money is in the bank. For a growth stage company, they can actually raise money for the next 3 to 4 years as well. But for very early stage companies as well, I would suggest that don't look at anything less than 1.5 to 2 years. So a lot of people think, I need money just for winning this next one big project, and after that I'm taken care of. It's almost always never like that, right? Any big project requires working capital. So it's never just one big project. It's just the next 3 months' salaries never works out like that. The third is not approaching or not choosing the right partner. And by not approaching, I mean different funds have different focus areas. Like Avishkar, for example, as I stated, has very specific focus sectors. It always looks for a semi-urban, rural impact across all its investment. There are some that focus on urban poor. There are some that focus only on specific sizes. There are some that focus only on large sizes. A lot of times what happens is without researching, if you end up approaching the wrong investors, nobody likes to say no to a plan in the first glance, first of all. They will waste your time. And then you will lose your enthu, right? The entrepreneur gets disillusioned after a certain point in time. So the point is to filter out whom you want to approach and then go only after them. Do a lot of homework before doing that. And if you end up getting offers from multiple VCs, then also I would suggest that you don't go after the highest valuation, right? That's like short-term thinking, because you might end up with an investor who sits in your head every day trying to steer your company for you, and you will hate it, right? Different investors have different philosophies as to how much involved they should be in a company, and depending on the kind of entrepreneur you are, right? Are you somebody who hates external involvement? Then don't go to the kind of guy who thinks they will always add value to your company by talking to you on a daily basis. Or are you somebody who thinks, okay, I lack skills in maybe marketing and sales and strategy, and I really want somebody who helps me? Then go to those investors who believe that they can spend that time on any entrepreneur that they're willing to fund. And you should always do these conversations with people, with successful entrepreneurs who've been funded before. I've noticed that these guys are always very helpful before making the choice of whom to approach or whom to take funding from. So yeah, I think we've come to the end of the presentation.